just actually, while we're still on this site and while I have this recording, this is the W3 Schools website. It has PHP on it. It walks you through on how to set up a PHP environment. It walks you through basic PHP syntax. You won't get to learn the nice little shorthand inline PHP that we've been doing when we build our templates and stuff, but it will give you basics, right? And it is a good site. It's not bad. It is a good site. There are some issues when you start getting into more advanced stuff like, where is it? MySQL database connections. I think they generally use the MySQL extension. The only difference really between these two things is that MySQL can be used procedurally instead of object-oriented. However, if you ever switch from your database from MySQL to Postgres, you've got to go find everywhere you use MySQL and replace it, because it is literally only for MySQL. It is not applicable for any other SQL type database. Whereas PDO, which is what we're using, doesn't care about the SQL database you're using. It will actually work for any SQL database, which is more handy for you because a lot of companies are shifting from MySQL to PostgreSQL because Postgres supports JSON. It supports actually being able to query JSON directly in the database. So because it has that ability and it's so powerful, and it has advanced relationships, triggers, all the other things that MySQL has as well, Postgres is usually the go-to for a lot of companies, especially if they're dealing with big data. So that's a thing to consider. PDO is definitely a little better. I'm not saying MySQL is wrong, and I would never mark you wrong for using it. If you chose to use it in your projects, that would be totally fine. I'm looking more for functionality, obviously, but just keep in mind the limitations of it when you're using it. So that's one thing to note. Good site, nice and interactive, allows you to actually run code directly on the site itself. It gives you like little try blocks, not necessarily with the MySQL part, but with all the JavaScript stuff. Probably not with that one, but functions. Yeah, gives you these little try it yourself blocks, and when you click on them, you type the code on the left-hand side, and it executes on the right. So that was just kind of handy. One other site that I find very handy and that I use for my day-to-day, if I'm doing anything with PHP, one of the big drawbacks of PHP is you have to boot up a server, right? So even if you're working locally, you've got to get WAMP up, or you have to get Apache up, or some kind of server. Otherwise, there's no way to work on your PHP. But sometimes all you want to know is the answer of a very simple PHP equation. And you don't want to have to boot up the whole server, save code, just in order to check that. There's a website called the Php Sandbox. So it's sandbox.onlinephpfunctions.com. You type your PHP inside here. You scroll down, choose your PHP version that you're working with, hit execute right here, and it will spit the results out below. So you don't have to boot up a server. You can actually just execute your PHP directly in there. Now, obviously, there's limits. It won't let you do file access, right? So you can't go out and grab a file or pull it back. No uploads, nothing like that. You can't connect to MySQL with it unless you connect to a remote MySQL that you own, which we haven't covered yet and gets a little tricky. But other than that, that's about it. You can still build classes in it. You can still build objects in it, all that type of stuff. You can get pretty advanced with it, and it will support it. Its real purpose is just to quickly get something, see if it's working, see if that's what you need to do, and get out of there. It's not really for long-term local development, obviously. The other cool thing about it is if you're working with somebody and you're trying to prove something, you can type it out in here, and then you can save or share your code and actually give them a link to it. Just like, has anybody used JS Fiddle or CodePen or any of those type of things? So they're all code sharing applications. So you can actually type out the code and then share it with another person, and then they can see what you're trying to achieve, right? So that's very handy. Just thought I would mention those two. I will actually take those two links and put them in our resource folder so that you have access to them as well. All right, so I'll leave them open so I don't forget. All right, so last week on Monday, sorry I wasn't here. I had a valid excuse. Car accident, I think, is a valid excuse if there's going to ever be one, right? I'm okay. My wife is okay. She has a sprained wrist. I have a few bumps and bruises and that, but for the most part, the car took all the brunt of it. It's completely a write-off. It's all smashed up. But yeah, so unfortunately, we missed a big lesson. I also, when I published the lesson, I tried to make sure that I got it up that night, and I was so, conscious about just getting it done and getting it online that I didn't review it, and I should have, because I recorded the wrong screen. I recorded the other screen on my desktop instead of my laptop screen. So instead, what I did do is, if you go to lesson videos, I gave you a link. I gave you a link to Tuesday's group. So lesson 6 for them would have been this week as well. It would have been last week's lesson as well. And lesson 7 is the last part of it. So there's a bit of extra duplicate there. So you may want to skim through quickly to find what you're looking for, but it is there. That being said, I will attempt to cover over what we did, right? Just review it quickly so that you kind of understand what we basically achieved. And I am starting you with starter files. So if you go to today's lesson under weekly learning, lesson 5, yay, we're there. Lesson 5 starter files is what we're going to start with today. So we'll do this together. Don't worry, I'll walk you through it because we got to move them over to the correct directory and stuff. So we'll do that all together. If you ever notice, Tim Hortons coffee stays hot for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, it just starts to go. All right. So am I in the, yes, I am. I'm Windows. Sometimes I lose track of where I am. Am I recording? Yes, I'm recording. Good. All right. So step 1, we'll download the starter files. There we go. So these will likely, unless you've changed where your downloads go, but if you've changed where your downloads go, you kind of know what you're doing anyways. These will likely, if you click on the arrow and click show in folder, they will wind up in your downloads directory, more than likely. And you'll see the lesson 5 zip there. Now, what I have found this semester more than anything, when we uncompress these, and we try to move them into the correct Apache directory, we usually wind up in some bizarre directory and we wind up editing files in the wrong place. So I'll show you the easiest way for us to edit these files and make sure they go in the correct spot. So our first step, open up WAMP, right? Or XAMPP if you're using XAMPP. Look for the green W. Might take a second to come up. Once the W comes up, if you click on the W and choose the www directory, it will open it up in your file explorer. That directory is what is getting served by Apache to our browser. That's the thing where all of our HTML, PHP, and CSS is actually being executed from. Okay? So once that's open, double click on Comp 1006. Let me just get rid of these 2 files so that we're looking at the same thing. Ish. So right now you will have a lesson 4 folder in there. You won't have the lesson 5 folder yet. All right. With both of the file explorers open, click back into the downloads folder, right? Don't close the other one. If you have to and you don't have this window open, just right click on your little folder and choose new window. Okay. You'll see the lesson 5 zip in there. Either right click on it and choose to extract all or double click it to open it. Just extract it directly into the downloads folder. Okay. I'm going to close the window it creates. And once you're done, you should have the lesson 5 folder in that folder. Okay. I don't know why this happens, but every time I compress these stupid things on Windows, it creates a folder within a folder, which is really bizarre, but that's what it does. So if you double click it, there's another lesson 5 folder inside of it. And if you double click that one, that's where our actual files are. So we want this lesson 5, the one that's inside the other lesson 5. And all I'm going to do, make sure I can see both windows, and drag into here and let go. And it should create a brand new lesson 5 folder in there with the contents. You can also just hit Control C and then click in that other window and hit Control V. That will also work. Once that's done, I'm going to close my downloads folder. So I don't need it anymore. And I want to make sure I can access this. I'm going to rename mine. You can leave yours the way it is, but I'm going to rename mine Monday because obviously I'm going to have 3 of these in the end of the week. Next, I'm going to open up my IDE, right? The thing that I'm using to actually edit my code. And you're likely going to have code open inside your IDE. Don't worry about that. Open up the file explorer that contains that lesson 5 folder, and then drag it into the IDE and let go. And it should open the new folder in the IDE. So now you should have lesson 5 Monday open inside that folder. Not much has changed. It looks basically the same as it did before, except for we've completed some steps. Let's just make sure that everything we have done has worked. If we open up our browser, go to localhost comp-1006. If you have the lesson 5 folder in the correct location, it should show up in that list. Now, you won't have as many folders as me, and that's fine. You should have at least lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What I would like you to do is click on lesson 5, and that should go to our site. Okay. And we're going to need to likely make some changes with our config file, because currently our config file is treating lesson 4 as the root. We're going to have to tell it to treat lesson 5 as the root. So let's jump back to our IDE, and we will open up _config.php. Oh, no, actually, we don't need to make any changes. Cool. No, I thought ahead of that. Awesome. Great. Let's talk about this page. So last week in the lesson, I actually did a whole bunch of things. We created the authentication script. We created the logout script so that we could authenticate our user logging in from this page here. They could log back out again, right? They could, when they were logged in, they would see specific links relative to them and their user role. And the interface would change based on whether they were logged in or logged out. So the first thing you'll notice, one of the differences between this page, I'm not sure if you knew you could do this, you can actually right click on a tab and choose to duplicate the tab, and it will actually not only duplicate the tab, it will duplicate its whole history as well. I'm going to navigate back, and I'll open 4 and show you the difference. Not for Wednesday, for Monday. right because we did that one. Lesson 3 Monday? Nope. Who would have a 4 Monday that would be... Oh, this is not going to work because I overwrote all those files. All right. Basically what we did okay, we made it so that when we log in, when we're not logged in, that certain things inside the navigation don't show. So our original navigation, if we open up the nav, main just nav.php, our original navigation included the home link, my house, the About Me link, Contact Me, My Profile, Create, View All Users as a drop-down under Users, Log In, Register, and Log Out. So we had a whole whack of links at the top of the page. Obviously, some of those don't make sense to be there when we're logged out, right? Because some of them were authenticated links. The authenticated links would have been users, right? Shouldn't be able to see that unless you're logged in because that's a security issue. Profile, you definitely shouldn't be able to see the profile unless you're logged in because the profile relates to the user who is currently logged in. Log out you shouldn't see when you aren't logged in because obviously if you're going to log out, you would be logged in, right? So it doesn't make sense to see those, so we hid them. And the way we hid them, the way we hid them was we used some helpers. So you'll notice these two lines on line 22 to 26, we have an if condition that basically checks to see if we're authenticated, and it says if auth. Auth is coming from these new helpers that we created under the authentication helpers. Here's our authentication helpers. And we have two of them. We have a not auth and we have a not admin redirect. We have an is authenticated and it is admin. Those were then turned into constants, calling those two functions. So now all we have to do to check to see whether a user is authenticated is to check if auth. That will tell us whether the user is authenticated. It will return a Boolean value of either true or false. Or if we want to check to see if they're an administrator, we just have to check if admin. And that will tell us whether or not they're the administrative role or not. Make sense? Kind of? Not very much? No? No feedback from you. Nothing at all. You're like a sphinx. All right. So those helpers are supposed to help us. And we're going to build more helpers because helpers are super important. And as you guys build your projects, you're going to want to build helpers as well. Because the idea of a helper is to take code that you're going to be performing a lot and turn it into a function so you only have to call the simplest amount of logic possible, right? So think about all the things that we do that are fairly redundant. If we were to check to see if the user is authenticated, we would literally be checking is set session user every single spot that we need to know whether or not a user is authenticated. We've reduced this down to just checking if the auth is true or false. That's it. We've reduced it down to a simple constant check, right? Makes our lives a little simpler. All right, so we've accomplished this page. We have our authentication helpers. We're going to write a few more helpers to deal with redirects. In our config file, we have some constants that are calling those. We're including our authentication helpers in here as well, which is important because then they will be included on the top of every single page because we're including the config file on the top of every single page. What else did we do? Let's log in. We're going to register a user. Let's register a user together because we should have two users actually. We're going to create an administrative user and we're going to create a non-administrative user. Now, what I found on Tuesday when we did this, ASDF is the first name, ASDF is the last name, ASDF@asdf.com, ASDF for the password, ASDF for the password confirmation. ASDF because it's these four fingers, and they're the four fingers that light on your keyboard, right? If you learned how to type in school. Once you're done, go ahead and click submit. You might get a user already exists if you already have that user like I do. Otherwise, you should get a green success. Users by default, their role will be a general user, meaning they have no administrative access to any administrative controls. Administrators can manage users. Regular users cannot manage other users, but can manage themselves, which makes sense, right? If you log into Facebook, you can do whatever you want with your account, but if Haiti logs into Facebook, she can't access my account and modify my account, right? However, an administrative level user at Facebook couldn't manage both of our accounts. Make sense? So if we go to login now with our new user and do asdf.com with the password of ASDF and hit enter, it should show you as logged in. Yes. What's happening? Users, new object not found. Hold on. The requested URL was not found on the server. The link's on the referring page. It's going to :8080, which is really, really bizarre. Are all the links pointed to there? Yeah, you're not being able to access any of those. This site cannot be reached. What are you using for a server? WAMP? XAMPP. I wonder if the issue is that it's pointing to a different, right, because it's pointing to localhost 8080, which is fine. Let's stop it and restart it. You pulled those files down while this was running, right? Okay, yeah, so we'll stop it and start it. It might just be an issue with the folder. Takes a really long time for XAMPP to start. Okay. Colon. Where's the colon on your keyboard? No, the colon, that's the backslash. I need the 2 dots. There we go. It's weird that it's asking you for the port number. That's super strange. Okay, so there's the dashboard. Dash. And 5. Okay, that's a good sign. Login, object not found. So this is the IP address that XAMPP is assigning. We're navigating to the wrong directory because it's treating it as literal. So it's requiring this part to be in capital letters, whereas none of these are in capital letters. So to fix that, if we open up your code, if we go to the config file, which is right here, we can actually correct it simply by correcting the config file. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind opening the folder. Okay, so all we have to do is correct this word to be capital code. See how now it all works? So it's because, so in Windows, Windows is not case sensitive. So Windows applications, they don't care if comp is lowercase or uppercase. Unix, which is what Linux is based on and Mac is based on, it cares. Case sensitive means something different, right? So that's the reason why you were having an issue, because mine are all lowercase, yours are all uppercase. So go ahead and register a new user, asdf@asdf.com. So this will create our user for us, and our user will be authenticated, but not an administrative role. It'll be a general user, so you'll notice that the users folder is missing. So you're getting a column not found, unknown password, probably because your SQL database is super, super far behind. Click on the W. Click on the PHP myadmin. Nope, the upper one. Your login will be just root for the login name. Don't worry about the password. So just ROT. Yep. Cool. Click go. Expand this so it's a full screen, because it cuts off things if you don't. Hit Control R to refresh this whole thing. Close the new tab. All right. Click on Comp 1006. Go to Import. Sorry. Browse. Go to Lesson 5. Yeah.
Open.
Yep. Open. Go to there should be a file in here that just says Comp 1006. No, so go back a directory. Go to Lesson 4, because it is in there for sure. That one right there. Comp 1006.sql. Open. Scroll to the very bottom. Hit go. Awesome. Go back to your application. Hit refresh. Too many letters?
Yeah.
Yeah, you also had too many letters though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Happening. Uncaught PDO exception, so same issue, you're likely behind in a databases. So let's go. Oh, is yours the one with the service that we have to keep turning off?
No.
No? Okay. So you're using XMP? We need PHP admin. I can never seem to find in this other thing. Under the services? Maybe it's just under admin. Yeah. Cool. That's nice and convenient. Comp 1006. I bet you this is a super old users table. Oh yeah, super old. All right, Comp 1006. Import. Choose the file. Lesson 4. That's SQL we need. Go. Cool. Just submit your form. Yeah, user is registered. You can go ahead and log in. Okay, so once you log in, you're going to hit this screen, and what you're going to notice is that you have a My Profile button and you have a Logout button. Login and register has disappeared because we've met the condition of if auth. Cool. However, what we haven't met the condition of is if admin, right? Because the administrative level, if we had met that condition, we would see a users directory here, right? So we can edit our profile. That's where we are currently. We're on our profile. And if you click the My Profile button, it will take you to that profile page. Well, we can't edit it because we haven't actually built that functionality. We're going to do that today. However, we can at least see our user's profile. If we try to be sneaky little hackers, and we come up to the address bar and we change it to like 21 and we hit enter, we get kicked back to the home page. And the reason that is because there's logic in there that basically says, unless you are the user that you say you are, you will be redirected home. So you can go to your profile, but you are not allowed to go to another person's profile, right? Which makes sense from a security standpoint. If I can access my Facebook account, I shouldn't be able to access Hades' Facebook account just by simply changing a digit, right? That's not right, right? So the logic that's preventing that, if we go to users show.php, I'll zoom in a bit because it's a little on the small side. There we go. So this line on line 2 is what we're using to actually prevent illegal logins. So, or sorry, not illegal logins, illegal access. So basically says, if you're not authenticated, that's the first thing. If you're not logged in, then you should have no reason to be on the profile page, right? It's your profile. If you're not logged in, you don't have a profile, okay? So that's the first thing. If you're not logged in, if you're not off, that's what that exclamation mark means, not, right? If you're not authenticated, what do the double pipe characters mean? Or, exactly. If you're not authenticated or, right, your session user ID does not match the get ID. Where do we get the get ID from? Where's that coming from? What's the URL, right? Yeah, from the URL. So if the ID that's inside the URL does not match the user currently stored in the session, then, and you're not an administrator, that's an important part. Why does it say, and you're not an administrator? Why is that important? Exactly. An administrator can access another user's account. But if you're not an administrator, you cannot. You are not allowed. So if your session user ID does not match the ID that you're asking for in your URL, and you're not an administrator, sorry, buddy, I'm going to not admin redirect you to the base path, which is home. So essentially, I'm redirecting you to home. That's where you're going. Cool. Fairly simple logic. The user, for the most part, can do a lot of different things. One thing the user cannot do, though, the user cannot go to users new.php. They will get kicked back. And the reason for that, if we open up the new page, new.php, is this if condition right at the top of our page. If you are authenticated, which means you are logged in, and you are not the administrator, then we'll redirect you. Because if you're authenticated, if you are logged in, there is no reason for you to create another user. There's no reason why you can't, just it's not done, so you're not going to do it. That's really what it boils down to. However, an administrator level should be able to create another user. Think about all the people who can't operate a computer that call Facebook or send them an email and say, my grandson wants me to have a Facebook account, but I don't know how to set it up. Can you help me? Right? Obviously, the person on the other end of the line needs to be able to create that administrative account or create that user account for them. So an administrator should be able to create a user. So let's see, what can our administrator do? Our administrator can look at other users, look at their profiles, and an administrator can create another user now, right? In addition, one other step that an administrator can do that we can't do, if we go to users Originally, we would see every user in our database. Now, we get kicked back to home. The reason for that is, oh, right, wrong index page. This one. The reason for that is the logic that is in this function called not_admin redirect. Let's take a look at the logic that's in that function. So we'll find that under our authenticated helpers. And it's right here on line 21, our function, not_admin redirect. If you are not authenticated or you are not an administrator. So not only do you have to be authenticated, you also must be an administrator, right? If you are neither of those things, we relocate you to whatever path they pass as an argument. So if they pass the base path, which is home, that's the slash, right? Then we will send them home. And then we exit the script, which means none of the rest of the page will actually execute. That's an important part, right? Exiting is extremely important because otherwise the code will continue to execute, right? So by exiting, no code executes. We don't have any security issues, no holes, right? So they can't access show unless it's themselves. They can't access index, period, unless they're an administrator. And they can't register a new user if they're logged in and they're not an administrator. Let's go back to our application and let's click log out. So now we have successfully logged out and our login and register buttons are back and our user profile has disappeared. So we're going to create a new user. I have a canker and I'm hitting it every so often. It's changing my voice a little bit. We're going to create a new user and we will make this user an administrator. Go ahead and call it whatever you want. Just make sure you remember the password, right? I'm going to create a new user called admin@test.com. You can call it whatever you want, though. It doesn't matter. And when I'm done, I'm going to click submit. Now, even though you called it admin, if you did, or maybe you didn't, it doesn't matter. It is not an administrator yet. It is not an administrator till we do what? Does anybody want to guess? Exactly. We have to change their role. We don't have an interface for that. We haven't created an interface for that. So where are we going to have to go to change the role? Database, exactly. We can either do it the hard way by just calling a SQL command to do it, right? Or we can do it the super easy way by just going into phpMyAdmin, changing the role virtually right inside the GUI of phpMyAdmin. So let's navigate there now. If you go to localhost/phpMyAdmin, that'll take you to this page. Your login is likely root. Just click go. And we're here. Our step one is to choose the database that we want to work with. The one we want to work with is the comp_1006. So we'll click on that, and that will take us to this page. The table is the next thing we want to do because we want to manipulate this table. So we're going to click on users. And we'll see all the users currently inside our database. And you can tell that I've been playing with this quite a bit lately between all the classes. Mine looks a little different than yours, obviously. And I'm just going to go find the new user I created, which should be at the bottom of the list, right? So there's my user, admin@test.com. So I'm going to scroll down to that user. And I'm going to scroll over. And about in the middle of the columns, you will see general, the word general. Double click that word general, and you'll get a little pop-up box. And in the pop-up box, there's like a drop-down. Change it from general to admin. And then just click off, and it will save it. So once again, just double click the name, change it from general to admin, and then click off and it will save. So now you have an administrative user that you can log in as. So if we go back to our application, let's log in as our new administrative user. So admin@test.com, ASDF for me, submit. There's my administrative user. His name is very on the nose, admin. So the first thing you should notice is that our interface is a little bit different. We have we have one extra menu option than we did before. If we click on the menu option, you can see that we have two options available to us. We have create a new user and we have view all users. That's because administrators have the ability to manage users. They can manage a user whether they're that user or not. The only thing an administrator will not be allowed to do, the only thing, is delete themselves, which makes sense, right? That's the only thing they won't be allowed to do is delete themselves. So this user right now can create a brand new user. So the little old lady says, I need a Facebook account for my grandson. We can click create a new user and we can fill out her information, right? So we can come in here and say, Grandma, we'll call her Edie. Seems like a good old lady name. Grandma Edie. Grandma's email address is edie@123.com. And her password, like, who are we fooling? It's probably password, right? That's Edie's password. And this is not far off what Edie actually looks like. So now we can click submit. And it will take us to the login page. That's a bit of a glitch. That is definitely not a good user experience for an administrator. It shouldn't take us to the login page. What would make more sense? Where should we go? We just created a new user account for a user. Where do you think it should take us?
You log into that account?
So assume her identity. So that is possible. Sometimes some applications will do that. If you create a new user, you become that user. Not quite though, because the administrator may want to do other administrative things, right? Sorry, what path were you down?
He can call the user.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So once they create the user, take them to all the users so they can see that Edie was added to the users list, right? Or even better, I would say just a little better than that, take him to Edie's profile, right? So because if Edie has a profile, you know that Edie was created successfully. That's a great place for us to go when we create a new user, is to Edie's profile. So we should think about that. When you're building applications, as you go through your applications, you should be noting little user experiences that, bother you or that you want to fix or that you want to change, right? And you're creating a list. That list will eventually become something known as a backlog. And what a backlog is issues, right? Issues that you need fixed that don't necessarily have high priority. This doesn't currently prevent the administrator from doing any of the things they need to do. So it's a low priority issue, right? It's just a little wonky, really. Let's go check and make sure Edie got created. If we go to users, view all users, we should see Edie at the very bottom of the page. Yep, there she is, Grandma Edie. And if we click on Grandma Edie, we should get to her profile, which is the other factor that the administrator, or the other thing the administrator can do. The administrator can view a profile that does not belong to them. We're looking at Edie's profile. That is not our profile, right? As a regular user, we would not be able to look at Edie's profile. But as an administrator, we can look at Edie's profile. And we can verify that too. If we click on my profile, it should show our administrator profile, which it does. So on Monday, last week, that's basically what we did. We put in the blocks for preventing users from accessing pages they shouldn't be able to access, for redirecting users when it's a security risk, right? That's when we redirect. If it's a security risk, we don't want them on the page, we redirect them away from the page so they can't possibly affect the page, okay? One other thing to note, if you open up create.php, you'll see at the very top another one of those if conditions. This is on the create page. The reason why it's on the create page, and you might be like, well, how can they even access the create page? They have to submit a form, right, in order to access it. Do they have to submit our form to access it? The answer to that is no, they do not. They can do something called a curl command, write directly from their terminal, and curl data directly to the form. They can also hijack our form, put it on another site, and also submit data directly to the form. Because of that, we need to be very smart and vigilant and make sure that we also protect the scripts that we're running that they submit form data to. And our create script is where we actually create our user. So we need to make sure, 100% make sure, that we prevent non-administrative users from submitting data to this form. Now, it's not so much of an issue on this one because we have an auth and a not admin, which means if they're authenticated and they're curling to our form, that's really bizarre. They wouldn't do that. We don't really care about them submitting to the form through curl commands. That's fine. We can prevent it even further because we can actually look at where they're coming from. And if they're not coming from our site, we can prevent it, but they can fudge that as well. Where it becomes more important is our edit script. So our update, actually, when they go to update a new user, right? We need to be careful because they can actually they can update users that exist if they access the form directly. So we need to prevent that. So we'll put that at the top to prevent that from them accessing pages they're not supposed to access. And that leads us to what we're going to do today. Today, we are going to finish our CRUD operations. So far, we have done create and we have done read. Our next steps are update and delete. In order to do update and delete, we need a form so that they can update a user. What needs to happen is the form needs to be pre-populated with the user's details, and then you can edit the user's details in the form. The update is the action, right? So when they submit the form, we need to take those details, find the user in the database, modify the fields by running a update SQL command, and then returning back to the user and letting them know everything was great. Destroy is a bit different. Destroy is that's all it does. There's no view for destroy. There's no form for destroy. It's literally submit to destroy and say this user needs to be destroyed. Destroy goes, and then sends them back with a success message saying all done, right? That's basically it. That's what we're going to do today. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll see where we get. I have a funny feeling we'll get edit the form done, and we'll get the update script done, and that's probably about it. We might get to destroy, but we'll have to see. All right, so let's take 10 minutes. A little bit longer than expected, but absolutely necessary. All right, got like 100 things open here now. Okay, so here's our user account. Right now I'm logged in as an administrator. I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log back in as a general user. So asdf@asdf.com, asdf. So here's my general user. Now, we have been able to create a user. However, what we don't have the capability of doing is updating the details of this user. So if the user's name changes, right? Say the user gets married and they change their last name, and they want to be able to modify their profile to reflect their new last name, right? Or maybe they decide to hyphenate their name, or maybe they decide to add their middle name. Whatever reason they have to change the name is totally their purpose. They need the ability to actually edit it, right? Or their email address changes and they no longer want to use this email address. Maybe it's become hacked, right? And they want to be able to use a new email address because this one's now susceptible. We need to give them the ability to change that email address. The other thing that we need to pay attention to as well is they may want to change their password, right? And they need the ability to do that. So we need to give them the actual ability to change their password. So all of these are normal, common things that a user who has a profile on a site must be able to do. The other thing to consider is if your website is global, so not just Canada, but oriented outside of Canada, you also have to be concerned with something called the GDPR, which is the European, I believe it's the European Union released the thing that all data for a user has to be by law able to be destroyed by them. So they need to be able to go to your site if they have an account and remove themselves by law. And you can't keep any data that is associated with that user that can be tied with that user. So all of their sales information, stuff like that, has to become anonymous. So you have to basically make it all anonymous. Their user details, their email addresses, their password information, their phone number, their street address, all of that has to be removed. That's now law. If you want to deal with international, like if you want to deal with other countries in the European Union. So you have to keep that in mind when you're working in some companies. Some companies don't care. Like I worked for a company called Fireside Agency, and they didn't care. That was not an issue to them. I just need to verify that this is actually, oh yeah, okay, good. Wasn't sure if it was recording from my headset or not. They didn't care because they were building sites for local tradespeople and stuff like that, and they weren't dealing with people that were in international areas. However, we built one site for this company called Distributors who wanted to do overseas sales, and that's when it became an issue, and we had to build in the logic that would anonymize a user, which basically means it goes in, it goes through our database, finds all that user's details, and anonymizes all the user's details, but doesn't get rid of the fact that the sales transactions have occurred because you need that for your own audit reports and stuff, right? Can't get rid of the sales. You just need to anonymize them so they can't be associated with a user. So we need to give the user at the very bare minimum the ability to edit themselves. We will also give the user the ability to remove themselves. They will be able to destroy themselves. We'll let them know. We'll give a confirmation and say, hey, you're about to destroy yourself. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? And then they can click yes, and we'll delete the user from the account. So we'll do both those things today. Today and next week, possibly. So let's jump back to our site. I'm just going to close these all off. And I'm going to open my sidebar. And I found this the other day. If you hover on top of where your folder name is, you'll see this little like two square boxes that are overlapped with a minus sign. If you click them, it closes all the folders for you. So it's a little easier to see what you're working with. I thought that was kind of handy. Might not be available in brackets if you're using brackets. So right now we have, under our users folder, we have 5 files. We have create, index, new, and show. When we are finished, we will have 8 files altogether because we are going to add edit, update, and destroy. So why don't we start with the edit page? So we'll right click, choose new file, and we'll create an edit.php file. Now, edit and new are actually very similar. There's not much difference between those two files. So what we will do is we will go to new.php. We will hit Control A, so it highlights everything, or Command A if you're on a Mac. Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac to copy it. Go to edit.php and Control V or Command V if you are on a Mac. And then save it. So all we did was copy the new.php over to edit.php because not much is different. Let's edit some of the stuff that we have some issues with. So one, line number 2, where we have this if, auth, and not a min redirect, that whole logic is no longer applicable. So let's just get rid of line number 2. So delete that line because we have to write a different block of logic there in order to handle if the user is trying to edit somebody that's not them. When we built our whole website, we have this included file for the form, right? And the form, the reason why we built it separate was because the form doesn't change if you're in new or edit. Its functionality changes, but the form basically stays the same. Both forms will have a first name, last name. Both forms will have an email address, and both forms will have passwords. So both forms will be identical. We're going to be a little smarter. Instead of duplicating the form, we're going to use one, and then we'll just make sure the functionality of it works differently if it's an edit form or a create form, right? So one of the ways that we're going to deal with that is to deal with the form action, because if we are on new, our form action points to create.php. That's fine, right? It makes sense. However, create.php won't meet our needs if we're trying to update a user. So we need to change where the action is actually pointing to. So what we'll do is we'll create a new variable right here, just under active, and we'll call it $_action. And we'll put the action for it directly in here. The action for this, so it will be, let's see, it'll be base_path dot / users / update.php. So it'll be our action path. So that's cool. One other issue that we have right now is this H1 says register a new user. Well, we don't want to register a new user. We want to edit an existing user. But I want to customize that so that it actually says edit blah, person's name, right? In order to do that, I need to actually get the user and bring them into our page, which is fine because I need to do that anyways. If I'm going to edit them and pre-populate the form with their details, I need to pull the user into our page, okay? So we're going to follow some logic that we did with show.php. When we look at show.php, so my profile here, you'll notice that we have the query string at the end. The question mark ID equals whatever number for the profile that we're working with, right? We're going to do the same thing with edit, so that when we go to edit.php, question mark ID, blah, 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 it will actually provide us a parameter of the ID in our edit page, and then we can use that to pull our user in through that ID. So let's pretend the ID is there. We will come up here. We're going to create a new PHP block. And we're going to grab our user. So the first step is we need to grab our connect script, right? In order for us to connect to the database, we will need our connect script. So we'll create a variable called con, or no, sorry, we need to include it. We'll include once root dot includes underscore connect dot php. So that will include our connect script. After we have our connect script in place, we can go ahead and create our connection. So we'll do $con equals connect. And you might remember connect was the function we created about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So we have our connect function. We need to build our SQL statement, right? Our SQL statement is just a string. That's all it is. It's assigned to a variable called SQL. So we're going to create a variable called SQL. And it's a simple SQL statement. It's select star from users where ID equals $ID. We're going to put a bound parameter in there. And the reason why we're using a bound parameter is because we're pulling the ID from the URL, which means people could put whatever the heck they want in there. And we don't want to just grab that data and shove it into our database or do any queries against our database with just random data from the user. By using a bound parameter, we restrict this value to being a literal value, which means it won't get executed as a MySQL statement. It will be treated as a literal value. Let's turn this whole thing into a statement. So we'll do STMT equals $con prepare $SQL. So that will take that SQL statement. It will say, this is the MySQL command. This is a bound parameter. So it will expect that when I go to execute this, that we will have populated this bound parameter with a value before it executes. All right, let's bind our parameter. To bind the parameter, we just reference the statement, and we type in bind param. We give it the parameter's name exactly as we wrote it down, so $ID. The value we want to bind, which is our get ID, and what data type we expect it to be. Interestingly enough, this actual thing, it doesn't just validate that the data type is in param integer, it actually casts it. So if you give it a string, it will cast it to an integer. If you give it an integer, it will cast it to an integer. If you give it a Boolean, it will cast it to an integer. No matter what, it's going to cast it into an integer. So if it's something it doesn't understand, it'll return back nan, which stands for not a number. Our last step is to tell the statement to execute. STMT, execute. And that will execute the statement against MySQL. And basically, inside STMT will exist this object that we now have that we can either fetch data from or do whatever we want with it. It'll give us this wonderful PDO object to work with. So let's get our user, sorry. It's user, and then it's $STMT. Fetch, yes. Make sure you do fetch and not fetch all. If you do fetch all, you will get a nested array with a bunch of user rows in it. This just gives you back one singular user. So a lot of lines just to get a user back. But the biggest part of that is it promotes security, right? We never trust information from the user. If you watch the video from Monday, you'll notice I iterate that more and more and more about validation, sanitization, and normalization. That's where we take the user's data and we make sure that data is validated, that it's what we expect it to be, sanitized, so we strip any content that's not supposed to be in that data out, and normalized, meaning it's in the format that we're expecting, right? We need to do that. That is super important, not just in PHP, but any application where you're taking in user data. So this will give us the user. Now that we have the user, we're going to do something a little tricky. So when we built our form, right, our create script, if it hit an error, it would send the user data back to the form. The form would actually take that user data and repopulate the form, right? So that way the user wouldn't be starting from scratch. The user would be starting from where they ended off, right? So if they didn't put their email in the correct format, they would see the mistake they made and be able to correct it, okay? We never give them an empty form to start from scratch because it's a bad user experience. However, we get to take advantage of that whole feature, right? Because all we have to do now, if we want to populate the form with the user's details that we just got, we just simply assign that user's details to the form data session variable that we created before. So let's look at the logic on how this works. Okay. I'm going to open up, Haiti, are you there? Okay. I'm going to open up first the header file. So in our header file, we created a session variable called form data that we're looking for, right? Whenever we create a user or we're dealing with user data, we will populate the post that we get back from the user from their form into this variable, right? Then in the header on every single file, if that session variable has any information in it, we will take the information in it and store it in a variable called form data, and then we will unset that form, okay? So following that logic, in our edit.php, if we access this session form data variable and make it equal to the user, it will continue through the logic, assign it off to form data, and make it available to us, as long as we do it before we include the header, which is what we're going to do. So let's go to edit.php. First step, we want to start a session. So we're going to say if session status equals PHP underscore session none, then session start. So that will start our session for us. Now, obviously, it's redundant because on line 16, we have the same line. Go ahead and remove the line on line 16. We only need it started once in this file. So that basically says if our session is not running, make sure we start our session, right? Next, what we'll do is we will access our session form data variable, and we'll make it equal to our user. And the reason we can get away with doing that is because we've been constructing our forms purposely with the same naming convention as our database. So that way we can always reliably know that the keys in each one of these associative arrays that we're working with will always be the same. So we can just take user and dump it directly into form data because the columns inside the users table are named the exact same as the name fields inside the form. They are identical. And I have a graphic to show you that, an infographic that I created, spent many hours doing. It's pretty, I promise. Well, not really. I'm not a graphic designer. All right. I want to show you. I want you to download VS Code. That's your homework for next week. Okay. All right. I'm going to go to the lesson plan that we have. I'm going to pull up this week's lesson, which is edit, update, and destroy. That's the other thing too. If for some reason there's an issue with the video, all the information you need is in these lesson plans as well, by the way, which should help. All right. Getting the user. Do. So this is essentially what we're building. So here's our edit.php page. The left side is what our user's database table looks like. And there's our column names. And there's a whole bunch of columns in there, right? We have the ID field, we have the first name, last name, email, password, avatar, role, created at, and updated at. The only fields I care about right now are these four. They're the only ones that I really care about. The naming convention, that's the terminology that we use in the industry. Naming convention is how we structurally name something, right? It's the format that we use to name something. We can use naming conventions and stick with them to make our lives as developers a lot easier. So one very common naming convention, and it's funny, I've been programming in PHP for about 20 years, and this is something I did not learn to do or realize that I should be doing until probably about 2014. So only about 5 years ago that I finally picked this up. I've adopted this practice, and it has made my life so much easier just by doing this. A lot of people, what they will do, they'll say first name, but they'll do it first and then capital N-A-M-E. So they'll change these column names and they'll call it whatever they want, right? Or they'll do first, or they'll do F name or L name, whatever they want, right? Then in their form, so here's their form right here. In their form, they'll then use first name, last underscore name, and email. The problem with that is now these fields are formatted different than your form fields. So here's what happens. When we submit a form, PHP is going to create this post object, right? We've seen that like a few times now. It creates the post object. The keys it uses in the post object come from the name field of your form. I'm not sure if you knew that's what happens, but that's what happens, right? Yeah, exactly. So whatever you name these, that's what the post keys will be called.
Yeah.
Those things are one-to-one, right? When you grab the user's details back, right, and you go to access them, it creates this associative array here. Can I zoom in more? There we go. It creates this associative array. Notice that these field names are the same as the pink labels. That's because when you fetch, PHP takes that row in MySQL and converts it into this associative array. It turns it into this thing, right? These become one-to-one. That's where our disconnect occurs. Our fetched user and our form don't know about each other. They are not communicating with each other. The keys can be different. But if we force ourselves to make them the same, then everything becomes so much simpler. Because if these field names are the same names we're using inside here, we wind up with this wonderful bliss where all those columns have the same format. Our form is automatically using the same format that we used inside our database purposefully because we named it the same, right? Our postback will always look the same because it obviously adopts the form. And any fetched user will also look the same, which means now if we take the fetched user and assign it to our session form data, it will automatically populate those fields inside our form perfectly, just by maintaining the naming convention that we chose when we named the fields inside our database. Now, you don't always get to do that, unfortunately. Sometimes you come in late, somebody has already created the database, and you're working in a new form. So sometimes those things won't match one-to-one, which sucks, because it makes your life super difficult. But if you have control over it, it's best to make sure that the keys in your database are the same format as the keys that you're using inside your forms and inside your associative arrays and stuff like that. Maintain the same format. It'll make your life a lot easier. And that's something that we're kind of relying on here, that this user, which is coming back from the database, is in the same format as our form, because in our form, we're pre-populating as long as that thing exists, right? And by following that common naming convention, we won't trip over ourselves and be like, oh, that one's got to be called F name, or that one's got to be called this. We just make sure that we adopt the same naming conventions, right? Because at the end of the day, this and that can be two different things, right? Which can make things a little problematic. So the other place where that comes in important too is, think about it. When we submit our form for create and we submit it to the create field, if it's wrong, right, we take the post object that gets created from the form and we send it back. That works because the keys in the post object come from the form. But if our user that we're pulling from the database has a different format, we now have to do crazy logic in here that basically says, if this key exists, then do this. If this key exists, do that. Whereas if we just maintain the same naming convention, we never have that issue. Does that make sense? Or is it like clear as mud? It makes sense? Okay. Sorry? What do you mean?
They have said that, and I have to
Oh, order. No, they don't have to be in the same order. So that's the great thing about associative arrays. Or you guys don't really get to play with associative arrays very much in Java because they don't really have, I think they have something that's similar, but not really. Web languages, like this is a common thing. Like we have associative arrays, we have hashes. Basically the idea is that, you know how an array has indices, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? An associative array, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, you have keys, first name, last name, email, password. So instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, you have first name, last name, email, password confirmation, okay? Just like an array, if I want to access the third element in the array, I would say array brackets 2, right? And that would give me the third element of the array. With associative arrays, it's so much easier because I go array first name, and I get that value. Array last name, and I get that value. So order doesn't matter at all. The only time order would ever matter is if you were trying to be cheeky and iterate through it. And we're relying on the order in order to do whatever logic you're going to do. But that is not a smart way to program. That's a bad pattern. You wouldn't do that pattern, right? Rely on the fact that you know what those field names are and access them directly, just like you would with a regular array. Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Sorry, I don't mean to go on these tangents, but I feel like if we really see the thing translucently, it makes more sense, right? All right, so we've assigned our user to form data, and hopefully we understand why. Okay, so now this is going to get taken by the header, right? Because we're including the header here. So the header file is going to take that user, assign it to form data. Our form, there's so many files. Our form is going to check to see if it's set, and if it's set, it's going to put the value inside there. Perfect. So what do we need to do our form? Not a heck of a lot. We do need to take care of one important detail, which it looks like I've already done for you. Why did I do that already? That's not very smart. Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. That's awesome. Okay. So the next piece we need, our form. Currently, its default action is pointing to create.php. However, if we're editing a user and we need to update, it needs to point to a different action, right? You'll remember in our edit page, we created this $_action. So basically what we will do is say, hey, if action is defined, use it. If it is not, then use this other default thing, okay? And that looks like this, which is so nice and simple. Okay, it's kind of simple, it's kind of not. Why don't we actually make our lives a little bit easier? We'll create a PHP tag. This is inform.php. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. This is inform.php. Create a set of PHP tags. And what we'll do is we will define action again, because you can do that in PHP. You can actually reassign a new value to a variable. And you can do that in any language, really. And this is going to be equal to action or base path dot users create dot php. So basically the idea is if action is defined, then action will just be action, right? Otherwise, it'll be equal to the create. So the default will be the create path. Now, all we have to do is this action path that's right here right now. We're just going to get rid of that. And base path, we're going to change to $_action. And those are the two pieces that you're writing. So once again, if action is defined, which in edit.php it is, then we will use the action that has been passed. If it is not defined, we will use the base path ./users create. So either update will be used or the create script will be used, one or the other. And then make sure you save that so it's kicking around still. Now, one issue we're going to have right off the bat is in the form, it says if authenticated, so if you were logged in and you're not an administrator, it will redirect you. Well, that's going to create a logic problem, isn't it? Because we're in the form. And we are authenticated because we're editors. Right now we're editing our profile, so we have to be authenticated, right? So that's going to create a bit of an issue. We need it to basically ignore that, right? So what we can do, we're going to add one little piece to this that basically says is set $action, sorry, with a not operator in front of it. So if the action is not set and you're authenticated and you're not an administrator, you won't be able to edit. I have a funny feeling that logic is a bit goofy. I'm going to have to fix that logic. Right now, we just need it to work momentarily so that we can access it while we're logged in. All right. If you go to show.php, so just click on your profile. That'll take you to the show.php. Change the word show to edit.php underneath your profile. So go to your profile, click my profile, and just change the word show to edit and hit enter. And you should see a form pre-populated with your values. Now, what you will notice is password and password confirmation are not populated. That is intentional because we can't show the user their original raw password because we hashed it. We don't know what their original password was, so it would be impossible for us to show them their original password. So what we have to do is leave them blank. And basically what we'll do for a password reset, though this is not the best password reset in the world, if they populate these with values, then we will change the password. If there's no value in there, we won't change the password. We'll just leave it empty. Any questions about any of this so far? All right, so our form is doing double duty now. It will work for our create page. It will work for our edit page, which means that we have dried our application. Dry stands for do not repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself, right? It's like a programmer's mantra. That's what you should be telling yourself at all times. If you find yourself writing the same code more than once, turn that into a function. Good way to think. We've dried up our application by making the form kind of do double duty. Our next step is to take the data that we send from the edit form and process it in our update.php file, right? So that's what we do at all times. We create a view, and then we have a processing file to deal with whatever content we get from that view. So if you open up your little sidebar again, under users, you're going to create a new file called update.php. You should see your details. So if you go to if you go to your profile, yeah, you need to log in. Yeah. Register a new user. You have an error anyways. You have a parsing syntax error, unexpected ampersand in the form on line 3. Is that 3? I think that's 3. So go to form. Line 3, because you wrote an ampersand instead of a $sign. The variables always begin with a $sign, so save it. Go back. There you go. So just do ASDF, that's all I do. Or, yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Just make your email address something super simple and your password like ASDF or 1234. And then once you've created that user, go ahead and log in. The user already exists?
Yeah.
Okay, then log in as that user. No, log in, Haiti. Yeah, and then log in as that user that you just created. So once we actually go ahead and submit this form, we're going to submit it to our update.php page. While we're just waiting for a second, if you want to go ahead under your IDE, make sure you've created an update.php page. Because this is just a PHP page and there will be no HTML on it, we can create an opening PHP tag and leave it open and not close it, because it will actually explicitly close on its own. If you're not comfortable with that, go ahead and close it. That's totally fine. However, that is completely valid syntax. Are you able to create a user?
No, create.
Let me see for 1 second. I just want to see if it's a you thing or if it's an it thing. Your email wasn't in the valid format. Where's your at symbol?
It's like 64.
That's weird. Why isn't it 2?
I'm not sure. I use the ASCII.
Okay, so you have logic somewhere that is causing the email. It's that at symbol you're doing.
Yeah,
it's not the correct at symbol. Oh, I see. It's under your Q key.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yes.
Where's your caps lock? Oh, there it is. How do I hit that key? It's not shift. It'd probably be function Q. Nope.
2.
Function 2?
Yes, maybe like that.
No, that creates an ampersand. It's
Function.
something to do with that Q.
No.
Try Control Q. Control Alt Q. Control Alt Q.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully that is the correct one. No. I have a funny feeling that whatever symbol it's creating is not an at symbol. Have you been able to create a user yet?
Yes, it happened before. I create my user, the admin, I check everything. Maybe it typed something wrong. Maybe.
I'm not sure.
No, because I did it in the beginning of the class. I checked, I create new users. I did everything.
Let's go grab a user that I know already exists. They're all tests. Every single user is a test. Okay, now you're in. So we go to show, and we type in edit. You're getting kicked back, so you're missing one of the logic pieces that we finished. See how you have this space? You can't have that space. So when you do a function, doesn't matter what programming language you use, when you do a function, you have the function label, right, whatever the name of the function is. Then you have your parentheses. Those parentheses have to be right next to the label, because basically what you're telling the program is that this is the name of my function. These are the arguments that I'm trying to pass to my function. That's what that means. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to make sure they're together. So go ahead and save and then refresh. There you go. Go to my profile. Double click on show. Right there. There you go. Change it to the word edit. Hit enter. Something else is wrong. Unamen redirect. I have a funny feeling your edit page. Right. We removed line 2 for now, I think is what we did. There, and it's working. All right. No worries. Okay, so now under your IDE, Haiti, under users, you're going to create an update.php page, and you're going to add the PHP opening tag to it. And then you'll be caught up. Yeah?
Update page can be similar to like the create page?
No, it's going to be slightly different. Some of the patterns that we're going to use are going to be similar, but it's more like a combination of show and create mixed together. Because we have to go get the existing user and then modify the existing user. So it's a little bit of a double thing, but it's a good thing to do anyways because it will get you used to the pattern. So first, all I want to do is basically make sure that the data that is coming from the form is actually hitting this page. It's like the number one step. So what I do is I simply var dump $_post, because if I'm getting the data that I'm supposed to get, I will see it. By dumping the whole post variable that will contain everything to do with the form, I will see what I need to see. It's getting chilly in here. This room, I've taught in this room about 4 times, and it's always the same issue, and I've complained every semester about the climate in this room, and nobody does anything about it. You just freeze. It's almost warmer to keep the doors open. Like, yeah. All right, var dump $_post. Very simple. Go back to your form. Just click submit. We should see data. If we're not seeing data, there's a problem. And we are not seeing any data. So go to your form. So click on my profile. Change the word show to edit in the address bar. And then you should see the form itself. Yeah, you're good. Okay. Now when you click submit, it should go to update.php, sending that as a post request, and we should see all the data. Oh yeah, we should see it all. However, when I click submit, I am getting absolutely nothing from that form. Oh, I see why. I see why. If you look at the top, all of our data is getting added as query parameters into the address bar as a get parameters. That does not make a lot of sense. Something must have changed in the form. Yep, sure enough. We removed the method. We need the method equals post in the form. I don't know how I removed the method. I must have did it when I was deleting stuff. Sorry about that. So make sure you add that into the form on form.php. Just this. And yours is going to the wrong location altogether? Is what you said it was going to forbidden?
Yeah.
Action or base path dot slash. You have create. It's create. So CREA. There you go. Save that. Refresh that page. Go back to your form there for a second. Refresh the page. Just right-click on the min for a second. Like right-click on that field.
Here?
Yeah. And then right-click.
Okay, right-click.
Yeah, and choose inspect. Oh, wow. Can I steal your mouse for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I just want to see where your form is pointed to. Form action. See how you have it like this? The reason is, see the space right there? Yeah, it's creating that issue. Yeah, definitely no space. Now try refreshing. Cool. Kill that thing. Now hit submit. Better than not before.
Okay.
It's not var dumb, it's var dump.
Oh.
Yeah. Dumb means something completely different. Yep, change that to edit. Hit enter. Okay, on call to undefined function, bind param in lesson. Let's go to edit page. So edit.php for me.
Edit.php?
Nope. Edit.php. Your bind param is off statement. So it's actually, so that is equal to statement. So it's not an equal sign there. It's the thin arrow.
Yeah?
Yeah. That one, yeah. I don't know if they have to be bunched up together. I can't remember.
I see.
Yeah, I think they might have to be, yeah. There you go. Now refresh. Oh, you could have just refreshed. All right. Works?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hit submit, Diego. Nope, we've got a problem. Let's go to our editor. Let's open up form.php. I have a funny feeling, yep. So right after that quote character, you need to put a method equals post. And then you'll be up to date. Nice. A button? Oh, for the submit button? Should be at the bottom of the form. Is it disappearing? Yeah, you've got a submit button.
Yeah, but for the user to edit, like they got to have this.
No, they just edit this form and then hit submit. Like we could make it so that it's not submit, it's update instead of, but we'd have to do some logic to do that. Yeah. So if you hit submit, does it go to the, perfect. All right, good, Diego? Okay. So when we hit submit, we should see it. Let me refresh my page. Whoops, Control R. Submit. There we go. So we should see the whole thing. There's all of our data that is being processed in our form and coming back to us. So just like we did with Create PHP the first time we ran it, same idea, right? We just run this so that we can actually see the data. All right. Here's kind of an off-topic question. How many people in this class need some support for their projects? A few of you? Okay. So what I think we'll do is we will complete update.php next week with destroy, and we'll introduce the parent-child relationship next week. For the last 40 minutes of class today, I will help you with project support wherever you're having an issue with your project. Okay? I think that's the easiest way to go about this. That being said, the users that we've created are basically done minus the edit and update part. So you can start implementing your users into your projects, right? And like I said, you can just copy and paste what we did in class. It's totally fine. I mean, we struggled enough with it, so we can definitely just use it. You've definitely earned it. So yeah, so for the last 40 minutes, we'll do some project support. Okay, cool. Let me stop this and save it.